Greetings. I'd like to share with you today a publication that the NRRA, the Northeast Resource Recovery Association, produced in 2018 with the help from the USDA, and the grant project was entitled Yes in My Backyard. And the purpose of the grant, as you can tell, was to get people to compost in their backyard, and that included businesses, institutions, as well as residents. So this document is an 87-page document. It is $15 if you purchase it right from NRRA. There is a $5 shipping fee. Very affordable for 87 pages of lovely information. I will quickly just run through a few of the topics in the table of contents. So, of course, we have our introduction, composting equation, the compost bin, getting started, school composting overview, compost bin operation, finished compost, program evaluation. And then in the appendices, we have a glossary of terms. We have a bunch of composting resources. We also have some highlights of what some schools are doing. So we have a few profiles, composting at schools. More helpful documents, works cited and resources. And then as a bonus, we have some lesson plans from the Northeast Resource Recovery Association curriculum. They have two K through 12 curriculum, teaching toxics and the 3 R's of the Common Core. And so for that appendix, we pulled some of those lesson plans that have to do with composting for the different grades. You can get this publication by contacting nrrarecycles.org. That's the website, nrrarecycles.org. Go to the School Recycling Club and then down to programs and curricula. You do not need to be a member of NRRA to purchase this curriculum. But what we're going to do today is we're just going to run through a few of the highlights to let you see this lovely publication that many people have joined together to create. So let me just give the acknowledgements to those that helped us create this. The first edition of this guide was written in 1997. It was made possible by the relentless dedication and enthusiasm of the Belmont High School and New Boston Central School in New Hampshire, their students and staff, especially the kitchen staff and administrators. At that time, the New Hampshire Governor's Recycling Program and the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services conducted a composting in schools pilot program to test whether backyard composting was possible for New Hampshire schools. So that was a while ago, 1997. Now, 2 decades later, the guide is in its 3rd edition. The 2nd edition was printed in 2006, but nothing was changed in it. And it continues to help schools implement their on-site school composting programs. For this edition, NRRA wants to recognize the technical expertise of Kat Duffy Buxton of Grow More Waste Less Food Systems Consulting, who runs the Edible Schoolyard and Compost System at Thetford Elementary School, Thetford, Vermont. Many of these pictures of the students are from that school. Her review broadened the scope of the guide by enhancing the microbial ecosystem and reminding all of us that your compost is a living environment. And you'll see also what I love with this guide, we added these quotes throughout it. So this one is one of my favorite. The soil is the great connector of lives, the source and destination of all. It is the healer and restorer and resurrector by which disease passes into health, age into youth, death into life. Without proper care for it, we can have no community, because without proper care for it, we can have no life. By Wendell Berry, The Unsettling of America, Culture and Agriculture. The introduction, simply, we have the students as being great recyclers. They recycle their aluminum cans and they recycle their paper. But what about their food waste, those cafeteria leftovers from preparing the students' breakfast and lunch? This material can be recycled through composting. Just a thought, a few little facts here. The One California Waste Generator study showed that students generate 37.3 pounds of organic waste per year, making it almost half of the total waste generated at a school. And that's from the California Department of Resources. There are other studies that examine why students throw away perfectly good food, but one thing is for sure, the United States has a school food waste issue. Food waste leads to increased waste disposal costs and wasted food budget funds, not to mention the environmental costs of sending food, to sit in a landfill. States and organizations are considering this issue and coming up with a variety of solutions. And as we can see, the EPA has created this food recovery hierarchy as one of the solutions to bring attention to how we should be managing our food, starting, of course, with source reduction, and then the last one would be landfill and incineration. So composting is one such solution that can be combined with other food waste reduction techniques while enhancing school project-based curriculum. The food hierarchy that I just mentioned, the last step is compost, or well, actually the very last step would be landfill incineration. But composting is considered the last step. We try to do source reduction first, then feeding hungry people. So in a school, that would be a share table. Feed animals. Many schools will have programs where there's chickens or pigs that they can feed. Then there's the industrial uses, using it for food scraps for digestion to recovery, so that's your anaerobic digestion. And then the composting, which is what we're here to talk about today, is composting at the school. Decomposition is nature's way of recycling. It is the natural biological process of organic materials, that's food, leaf, and yard waste, breaking down into a valuable soil amendment, just as a leaf does on the forest floor. Composting is managed decomposition using a balanced recipe of ingredients, water, and lots of air to encourage aerobic microorganisms to break down organic matter quickly. Composting these organic materials not only saves money by reducing the school's disposal costs, the process can also strengthen an environmental science program with hands-on science activities and provide the baseline data for enhancing project-based math curriculum. Educators can play a major role in teaching students about the values of composting, both in the school and at home, while providing a great example of natural life cycle. I love setting up composting in schools because of that, because it is a great example of the natural life cycle. It pulls together many, many talents, many divisions of your school. You could bring in the woodworking class, technology classes, you can bring in the horticulture classes, you can bring in math and science, and it gets rid of that 37.3 pounds of organic waste per year, which is the average amount generated in a school. Just to reiterate, school composting can reuse that organic material, saves money by reducing the school's waste disposal costs, creates a valuable soil amendment for planting or mulching, closing the food loop, put it back on the garden, provide an opportunity for students to study the biology and chemistry of how the composting process works, provide students with an example of a natural life cycle, restore biological soil health, improving natural nutrient cycling, improve the way water functions in landscapes, reducing the effects of flooding and drought, create a relevant entry point into discussions of changing climate, carbon and nitrogen cycles, methane and carbon dioxide emissions, and the greenhouse effect. It reduces greenhouse gas emissions, the CO2 from trucking and the CH4 from landfill emissions, catalyze a human understanding of the role of soil health as a framework for functioning health ecosystems. Best of all, it empowers students to feel that they can help make a difference. The student experience is greatly enhanced with cross-cutting project-based learning that offers practical hands-on application of knowledge. Composting at school offers ample opportunity to dig into physical and biological sciences, mathematics, current and historical global studies, problem solving, public service, and environmental stewardship. There is a rich history of how humans have managed and recycled waste all over the globe, with plenty of successes and failures to draw from. So just to reiterate, composting not only will help with what is going on with your school environment, funding problem-wise, finances, just as well as we mentioned, learning experiences. It does also address the global problems of soil health and the global food waste problem. Just a little fact here, 30 to 50% of the food produced never makes it to the mouths of people and animals. It gets wasted in farm fields, in food processing and distribution, in the retail environment, and in homes all across the world. It is estimated that food waste generated in the US alone could fill the Rose Bowl every day. What to expect in this guide. I quickly ran through the table of contents, but just to give you a little more detail, the guide, as I mentioned, was originally developed based on the knowledge gained from the 2 pilot programs in New Hampshire through the Governor's Recycling Program and the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Science. Since then, many more schools have developed compost programs, while local, state, and federal agencies have created guidance documents to help start programs. So those in the resource section of the appendices, lots of resources, plenty of them out there to go to. Sometimes it's easier just to have one guide, and that is what we try to do producing this one. This guide is designed to provide users with background information to help decide if they want to start composting, as well as how to set up, operate, and promote a school composting project. And as I said, the appendices include information sheets, tracking forms, and resources. In addition, the guide can assist teachers in educating students in the science, math, and solid waste issues using those sample lessons from NRRA's solid waste curricula. As always, if you have any other questions, do not hesitate to call the school recycling program. And again, that information is at nrrarecycles.org and go to the school tab. The composting equation, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. The guide gives you good 5 pages of diagrams and examples and brings you step by step to what the microbes need. We just want to continue to remind ourselves that the composting is living organisms. It is science. They are your new pet. It's a nice way to bring it into the school. It's easy to manage when the right conditions are created, and the microbes do need a balanced diet and a safe place to work. So they need their food waste, which is the nitrogen. They need the bulking agent that provides air, that's the carbon. In this guide, we also go into more detail to what are the microorganisms. We discuss the soil web and how, again, the microorganisms need their air, and to make sure that they have the amount of air they need, as well as they need the moisture, just like us. They need water and to live, but they don't want too much water because we don't want to drown them. And so we have step-by-step ways to be able to check on how you know if your moisture is appropriate. We call it the squeeze test. Again, if it smells, that means your environment is, something is off. Maybe too much nitrogen, maybe not enough bulk, maybe not enough air. Again, I'm not going to get into this because there's other videos that are being produced for this module that will get into those nitty-gritty details. And the relationship between air and heat. And as I said, you can find all of that in this guide. So let's move on to a little bit more to show you what we have in here. And again, the work that Kat Buxton provided for adding to this very ancient guide has been really, really helpful. And these are two examples of what she put into it. The lifeline of the compost pile at the schools, regular data collection of temperatures, moisture, and other observations can serve as the basis for your project-based math education, exploring the scientific principles to solve problems, and collecting student feedback to improve the school-wide materials collection and compost system. There's also the need to temperature, checking the temperature for, do you have enough heat for the compost? Temperature below 90 degrees indicate that the pile is not actively composting. And then there's a list of reasons why that could be. And above 150 indicates that the pile is too hot and should be turned to avoid burning up the big and little microorganisms. We also have many pages on the compost bin. The need of a school compost bin are not very different than your household backyard. Issues to consider when deciding what type of compost bin are right for a school include the quantities of food waste generated, attracting wild animals to the school, and extra finances to buy or build a compost bin. And there's many diagrams and pictures of how creative schools can get with building their compost bin, and also this lovely chart of knowing what type of bin size your school may need depending on the number of students. So the chart to the right will help you determine the size, number of bins, total cubic feet of space you will need to manage your compost, and be able to turn piles as needed. We move on into where the compost bin should be placed. And then the whole process of collecting it. So let me just jump back for a second to the placement of it. A lot of questions that the schools are concerned about, rightfully, are how to avoid attracting animals. So we address that in the guide as well. Everyone asks about bears. Bears are a rough critter to deal with, but there are ways that you can keep your bear from your compost pile. And then how to keep your costs down. So your staff and custodial team labor may slightly increase while the systems are being developed, but once the systems are in place, the labor costs will simply shift from time hauling and collecting heavy stinky trash to time spent cleaning buckets or managing the bins. And that's where the idea of the collection comes in. Variety of material for collecting. You want to make sure that you understand that your food waste is going to be wet and heavy, and so your collection containers are going to need to be waterproof, lightweight, and covered. To help determine the proper size of the container needed, consider the size and strength of the person lifting and transporting the food waste, as well as the amount of food waste produced at the school. So you could have 5-gallon buckets, you could have larger 30-gallon containers that then the 5-gallon buckets get dumped into, the 33 or 55-gallon garbage cans, with or without wheels, lined with a plastic bag. And again, they can be obtained, all of these can be obtained easily at your hardware department store. And then consider how the food scraps will be transported from inside the school to the compost bins. If stairs are not an issue, a wagon with short walls is an excellent addition to your system to carry a few of those 5-gallon buckets outside. And you see here, we just have a few examples of how creative people have gotten in their school to set up for their collection containers. And there are more examples in the guide. Go into it page by page, a couple more pages on, what about your plate scrapings and how to really manage the whole collection system by watching the student's routine, As I mentioned earlier, providing a share table, if it's allowed in your school, is a nice way to reduce the waste. It's nice to have your garbage can monitors, creating signs, and the trash, if you can possibly set up your system to make the trash bin the last stop. And we like to try to make the trash bin small, so everyone understands what they have to do before they get to that trash bin. Then we move on into the guide, speaking to how to get started, many pages of it. Starting a school composting program can be fun and easy. However, an understanding of how school composting works and whether or not composting is an option for a specific school is needed before you start. So you want to generate a team of 3 or 4 people, staff and community members, with a point person who will support the project for the long term and develop a system to keep that team going for years to come. So once your leader is in charge, leader or leaders, if implementing and maintaining the school composting project that's been designated, it is then time to meet with the principal to gain support. Hopefully they will say, I love composting, what can I do to help? Or sure, that it's a great idea, take the ball and run with it. But of course, there could be people that are going to think it's just extra work. They don't know what composting is, and they don't want it for the school. So you need to continue to, if you really want to make it happen, just keep regrouping, keep coming back with data and ideas that might finally work for everyone. So when you finally do get organized, once the decision is made to compost and the full support of all involved parties is there, it's time to organize the composting committee, solicit your volunteers, and it's nice to get parents and other parts of the community involved with this program, especially if you need to find a carbon source to bulk up your nitrogen source. And look to all of what you already have in place. You may already have an environmentally focused school organizations and clubs, have a newsletter. You may already have a newsletter. You already have a student council. Use the school's public address system for announcements. Contact, as I said, those local garden clubs or conservation commissions. Make announcements at any school-related meeting. Contact your local public works, recycling contractors and coordinators. There's been many towns that have the recycling coordinator in the town, or they have like a recycling team for the town, and they get very excited about what goes on in the school for recycling, and they are also a good source for potential funding. They'll may often set up scholarships, or maybe the PTO will be able to gather together some money to buy the supplies necessary for setting up the bins. And also in our guide, we have a complete list of all the supplies you will need to build a bin and the places that you can shop to find the material, the equipment. And I'm just going to close it with quickly running through the last few chapters here. So that's the first part of the book, which is pretty much getting that set up, getting it into play, doing your research. Then it goes into the whole school composting overview, what is going to happen. The school's compostable food waste will be placed in a separate container from non-compostable waste, and it will be mixed with a bulking agent, that's your carbon, leaves, or wood shavings, in an outside bin for composting. This will help to get food waste out of the garbage can where it is costly and useless, and into a compost bin where it will break down into a very useful, valuable, and fertile soil-like material. And then there's assigned jobs. So you will have a collector, and again, the guide tells you exactly what the collector is responsible for. You will have a bin operator. Their job description is defined. A compost coordinator. Compost coordinator gets to have the fun job of checking the moisture of the bin, the temperature, and turning the compost. So there's detailed descriptions on how you should turn your compost, especially if you're using a 3, 4, 5 bin system, how to set up each of those sections and how to put that turning process into a schedule to transfer all the materials from bin 1, bin 2, bin 3. Again, how to even secure that the bins are in place. So that is the compost coordinator gets to be in charge of all that. And then we have the compost starter, and the job of the compost starter is to start a new composting bin by setting the appropriate materials in the bin and to turn the contents of a full bin into an empty bin. Make sure there's plenty of bulking agent available at this time when you're doing this. And it is an ongoing responsibility. And again, the steps to how to do that for the compost starter. We move on into compost bin operation. Like, you think all those assigned jobs, yes, it tells about the compost bin operation, but this is also where I mentioned what equipment is needed, where you can find that equipment, what to do about winter, more information about once the bins are constructed and the bulking agent is selected and the compost equipment obtained, and then how you can begin your composting. Starting that new compost pile, like I said, that's the compost starter job, adding to the compost pile, and then dealing with your finished compost. And as I just briefly mentioned, we do also address what about winter. If your recipe is just right for the microbes, your compost will stay hot and very active all winter long, depending on your climate and how well your pile is structured. When the temperature drops below freezing, microbial activity may slow down and the compost may freeze. And so in that what about winter section, we have a few tips to how to work with that freezing. And then what to do with your finished compost, because you're going to have a bunch of finished compost, so you have to figure out what to do with it. Good fundraiser if you like, if you want to sell it. How to know when it's finished. There is the time to sort of let it cure. You want to make sure it's still not cooking. It's still, because if it is cooking and it's too hot, you don't want to be using it on your young plants. And if you're not sure if it's finished, turn the pile one more time and take the temperature. If the temperature rises, it's not quite finished. If the temperature stays the same as the ambient temperature, it's finished. And we do get a lot of questions about should the compost be tested, and we provide you information on that as well. And in the resource section, the folks that will test, and the prices vary. So we basically just provided who you could contact if you want to test your compost before you actually use it, and how to use the compost. And again, we're doing this because we want to be able to enhance the soil health. There is a big difference between dirt and soil. Dirt is a varying mixture of sand, silt, and clay, but has no life in it. Dirt is what is under your fingernails or on your shoes. You really cannot grow plants in dirt. Soil contains organic matter in the form of living organisms. Remember the billions in a teaspoon of healthy soil and in the form of a decayed plant matter of humus, which is food for the microbes. And compost of any kind makes great mulch around your fruit trees, berry bushes, in your garden beds. You can apply it as thickly as you need to for full coverage to reduce weed pressure and retain moisture. There is no such thing as too much compost. And you may think that you were done by then, but there is always remembering to do program evaluation. So we go into the whole education, kickoff, and promotion. It is key. You cannot forget to promote throughout your entire process, from when you are in your planning phase to operation. And as I said, if you have some lovely compost, it's a nice way to do a fundraiser for your school. So now you're talking marketing. And evaluating. You always want to evaluate your program. Because that's a nice way to promote it. And you also want to know, like, is the system that you set up working? Like anything, you may want to just fine tune little pieces of it. Yeah, it keeps you active. It keeps those students active doing this type of program in your school. And then, of course, the appendices, the glossary of terms, few examples of different phases, different ideas of what schools did. And those are the schools that we picked to put into the Composting at Schools appendix. Different size schools, limitations that they had. So that's pretty interesting to read how people found that they could still make composting work depending on their school environment. And the resources are New England. As I said, there you can find a lot of resources online all across the United States. And that's about it. Helpful documents, and then the lesson plans. And we hope that this guide will help you get started and continue with your school composting program to close the food loop at your school. I have found that this guide has actually helped out camps as well, not just schools, because the information is so thorough that probably even businesses could use it if they wanted to, but we have spread the word to camps as well. So thank you very much. And again, if you have any questions, you can contact NRRA, info@nrrarecycles.org, or better yet, go online, nrrarecycles.org, and go right to the school club tab and those pages there. Have a great day.